Hi, I'm Dylan Hillman, and I'm the Director of Training here at Sol-Ark. And today we're going to be going over how to do AC coupling on our Sol-Ark 15 two-phase model. So before we get started, there's a few numbers that you should know. There's going to be a limit to how much you can AC couple with this unit, and it's going to be a maximum of 19.2 kW on the gen side or the load side, and it does not affect the amount that you can DC couple. So the DC coupled limit's going to be 19.5, which is 6.5 per MPPT, and we have 3 of those, regardless of how much you have AC coupled. Now, I do recommend that you AC couple on the gen side as opposed to the load side. And the reason for that is we have a sensor for the gen side, and we can see how much it's producing in real time. You're going to be able to look it up on your app and see, hey, I'm making this much for my AC coupled solar. If you do it on the load side, you're only going to be able to see the net contribution. So basically, it'll power whatever's in your load panel first, and then we're only going to see on our sensor in the Sol-Ark whatever the difference is. So it's not quite as accurate, and most people prefer to see exactly how much they made. So again, definitely use the gen port when you're using a 15K. There are some other considerations to be made. In order for AC coupling to work off-grid, you have to have a battery. And I do recommend sizing the battery appropriately. So if you're going to AC couple the maximum, I would recommend that you saturate our DC bus 275 amps for the battery input. And if you're AC coupling a lot less, you can get away with a smaller battery. But generally speaking, more battery is better when you're AC coupling, because there has to be enough room in the battery to deal with the changes in production when you're off grid. Now, the Sol-Ark can control your AC coupled solar, but only if the grid's out. And we're going to do that via 2 ways, but the primary method is going to be called frequency curtailment. That means that your AC coupled solution needs to be compatible with UL1741 SA specifically. And that's going to allow us to do frequency curtailment between 60 and 62 hertz, and we can change our output frequency at half a hertz per second, which means worst case scenario, it takes 4 seconds for us to go from full power to 0 on your AC coupled solution, which is why what I said about the battery is important. We have to be able to put that power somewhere. If you have a large load, just go away while you're off grid with AC coupled solar. Let's go over how I have this particular Sol-Ark set up real quick for context. So I've got a 15K with the grid coming in, and then 200 amps coming in, 200 amps going out, and I'm powering this entire 200 amp panel. So if you're following along at home, this would be like if you backed up your entire house with one 15K with a battery. And in this example, we're just going to have AC coupling only, because again, it doesn't affect your DC side. So if you were to program this, you would go to your home screen, hit the gear icon up here, go into battery setup, and we're going to go to the smart load tab. Now, it might be a little confusing. This is all going to say smart load, but we're actually going to select this box here that says AC coupled for AC coupled input on gen. And that's going to change what these values mean, but it's not going to change the text on screen. So the meaning changes, but the text does not change. So it's still going to say smart load on, smart load off, but they have different meanings now. If we were using this for a smart load output, the generator input would actually be acting like an output. But today we're using it as an AC coupled input, so that's where our solar panels are all connected. And you can land them all directly right here. You don't have to go through another panel unless you need one for maybe microinverters or however you have your AC coupled system set up. But you'll notice that there's 2 values here, and it's either going to be a percentage or a voltage. And if it's a percentage or voltage, depends on what mode you have the inverter in. So back in the battery tab, here's where you, battery tab, you can pick either percentage or voltage mode, and depending on which one of those you've picked is the one that you'll be able to edit in the smart load tab. So for today's example, I'm in percentage mode. Now, for AC coupling, you want the high value to be when you stop producing power from the AC coupled solar, and you want the low value to be when you start. And that's so that we always have a buffer in the battery, because again, it can take up to 4 seconds to turn it off, right? So we want to have that. That value should be at a minimum 5%. I recommend 10%, depending on how big your battery bank is, of course. And then there's a few other options here. So you'll see that there's a frequency. So by default, it's going to be 62 hertz, and that is going to be the upper bound of our frequency curtailment for your AC coupled solution. And again, if you have UL 1741 SA compliant devices being AC coupled to us, which, by the way, if you don't know what that means, it's basically anything that's been made in the last like 10 or 15 years. So unless you have a really old system, this is how you're going to do it. But definitely check with the spec sheet before you set this up. But 62 will be the maximum, and that means that the AC coupled solar will turn off when our output frequency is 62, and it'll be a spectrum down to 60. So 60 is full power, 62 is zero power, and then we can adjust our frequency in between there to get partial production from the AC coupled array. If you do have an old school system that's UL 1741 only, then this needs to be 65 hertz. And I don't really recommend doing this too much, but if you do have one of those units that's that old, you also want to make sure that it's a little bit smaller as well, because it's going to be binary, right? So it's on or off. We have no curtailment in between, and you're going to want to make sure that you have somewhere to put all that energy. And we're going to have to get all the way to 65 hertz too, instead of just 62. And again, it's half a hertz per second. So instead of 4 seconds, it's going to take 10 for us to go from 60 all the way to off for one of the older style units, which means you're going to want your off value to be have a bigger buffer in your battery bank. You want to make sure that your battery bank can handle the full charge of your AC coupled array, all that good stuff. But anyways, your life will be a lot easier if you're using a 1741 SA system. So let's go ahead and proceed like we have one of those. The next option is AC couple to grid side. For the vast majority of installs, this particular option's not really going to mean much. But if you have an AC coupled solution that's hooked up to your home that is upstream of wherever the Sol-Ark is connected, but still downstream of your meter, and you have a limit from your utility company for how much you're allowed to sell back at any given moment, that's when you would use this option. So you'd select that, and then you actually have to go into the online settings to get to the exact number that will be targeted as your limit. But what it'll let you do is we'll curtail our own PV production on the Sol-Ark so that the net sell back to the grid from the building, wherever the external CTs are installed, will not exceed the limit that you program. So if you had a limit of maybe 10,000 watts to sell back continuously to the grid, and you have maybe 5 kW going on the AC couple solution already, we would limit ourselves to an additional 5 so that the net does not exceed 10. And it would do that in real time. But again, pretty unusual situation, but that's what it's for. And the last option here is AC coupled on the load side. Again, you do need to select that if you have it on the load side, and that just changes how we display the numbers, in the graph and the data in the app and everything. But again, I don't really recommend it because you're not going to be able to see the actual production of your AC coupled solution. You'll just see the net production. So I think that pretty much covers everything that you got to do with your AC coupled install with Sol-Ark. Again, it doesn't matter if you have DC, however much you have on the DC does not affect the AC for a 15K, but it is very important that you know it does affect the amount that you can AC couple or DC couple on our other units. Specifically 8K, 12K, all our smaller units are going to have that limitation. These 15Ks just have such a large internal bus that it doesn't matter. Anyways, that'll take care of AC coupling for today. If you have any other questions, please leave a comment below, and we'll see you next time.